Are you focused on me, or are you focused on that book back there? Good morning. It is April 30th, 2023, and the last day of NaNoWriMo. For those of you who are not writers, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writers Month, and in the course of a single 30-day period, the goal is to write a novel, which they clock at 50,000 words, so they mark it at 50,000 words. Oh, hi, Ben. So basically for me, because I don't actually officially sign up for it, I just kind of write along with everybody else. NaNoWriMo is more meeting my own personal goals and kind of figuring out how much I need to write and how fast I need to do it. Like just about everybody else, I backloaded it. So, you start out with the best of intentions and, oh, I only need to write X number of words per day. You miss a few days and then you miss a few more. Or, you have a few days that are less productive than you like, and you do get some writing done. You feel good about that, but you don't get as far as you should. I find that in general, I don't function well in a long-term way with arbitrary writing goals. So I find that as long as I set the goal to write something every day, even if it's just like 100 or 200 words, if I write something, it's still moving forward. It's still progress. But if I set a goal of like, oh, I'm going to write 2,000 words today, if I fall short of that and I do that consistently, I start to feel really bad about the book, or I start to feel really bad about myself. And there's no reason to, because the goal is mine. Like, I'm the one putting those limits and those restrictions on myself. So I've just learned not to do that. That's something I learned last year, kind of about halfway through writing Trophy Braid, that I felt better in the process and was overall more productive if my goal was simply write something rather than write X, not write a chapter, not write a scene, not write a word count, just write. If that's the goal, I can do that. So I try to set the goal of write most days, not every day, because you need days off. Some days I'm just not feeling it. Some days I'm just in a writing funk and I can't get the words to come out, or I try to sit down and do it, and what I'm producing is not good, and it's going to create more work for me on the back end, and it's not worth it to force myself to do a creative activity when I'm not feeling particularly creative, or when I'm not feeling that kind of creative. So I found that on days like that, I can sort of move the needle and still make progress and still move forward if I find some other writing activity to do. So something writing adjacent, not writing words, not writing the story, but editing something else that's waiting to be edited, or working on world building, or jotting down ideas for other stories, doing character building activities, developing personalities for characters that are side characters in the current book I'm working on, but will be main characters in another book, sort of fleshing out their personalities based on what happened in the book they're in and how that shapes them in the next book. So that's a really fun activity, and nobody's going to see that but me. It's not serving any purpose other than as a mental exercise for me. And it's still working on my craft. It's still working on my stories. It's still working on my world. And I find that doing that is really super helpful on the days that I just can't write. I'm not feeling it. It's not working. So that's what I do. So what I've discovered is I'm not a very fast writer. Because I give myself so much wiggle room, and because I give myself so much leeway, I only average like 500 to 700 words a day, and that's not a lot given the amount of free time I have. So NaNoWriMo has been a really interesting experience for me in that I was almost forcing myself to write even when I didn't feel like it. And I don't know that I would want to do that long term. I don't think that's sustainable for me, but to do it for just 30 days, to know that there's an end point and there's a point where I'm going to be able to stop, made it bearable for me. I don't I wouldn't want to do it all the time. I didn't like it, I'll tell you that. And some of that's just because I have a personality that just doesn't like being told what to do. I don't like being told what to do. It's just how I'm built. Even if it's me telling me what to do. So I don't think that forcing myself to write every day is sustainable, but doing it this month, and I didn't write every day this month. I wrote most days this month, but I didn't write every day this month. And there were some days where I was forcing myself to write, and that's okay because it was short term. I think if I was trying to do it all the time, I would burn out. But to do it for a short period of time where there is a definitive end, and I know that there's an end coming, and all I have to do is hold on until that end, that was manageable for me. So I found it to be an interesting experiment. I'll probably do it again in November. So yeah, I learned a lot about me and my writing style and kind of what works for me and what doesn't. I found it to be an interesting exercise and an interesting experiment and an interesting short-term way to sort of try something new and make myself change my habit, but knowing that if it wasn't working, I could just stop on the 30th and that it would be okay. You know, that I had done the thing, I had accomplished the goal that I meant to accomplish, and then if it wasn't working, I could just stop. And that is the situation that I'm in. Forcing myself to write does not work for me. I did write a book. It's not great. It's not awful. It's certainly not the worst thing I've ever written. But it's not good. It is salvageable though, so I will be publishing it. So all of the fantasy books, all of the Tirnoch books are substantial projects. They're all big books with big stories and big sweeping story arcs and lots of world building and lots of like lacing things back and forth. They are complicated and complex to write. And I knew two things going into April. One, all of the Tirnoch books that I have currently on my docket are already started. So none of them were going to be a good use for NaNoWriMo. Two, they're all too big. The stories are too big. They're fantasy books. They're like proper epic fantasy books. And so they're kind of fat. They're not as big as like a Sanderson book or something, but they're significantly more substantial than I would be able to kick out reasonably in a single month. And I didn't want to set myself up to fail. I wanted to write a full book, start to finish, in a month. So I wrote something else. I started on the first and I was like, okay, what are we going to write? I had no ideas. And for some reason, I got it in my head that I wanted to write a werewolf romance. So I wrote one. It is a contemporary book, and in the process of writing it, I kind of got into the characters, and now I have 3 or 4 more in that world with those characters that I want to write. So I'll probably do that over the course of the next year or so. These are all going to be self-published. I have a friend, Ian, who has very kindly offered to help me with that process when I get stuck. So feeling like you have that sort of safety net of you've got a friend who's done it before and they know what they're doing. So I'm going to try it on my own, but if I falter, knowing that she's there, like backing me up and as an information and a resource is so comforting. Yeah, it's really something special. So if you are stepping into writing, make yourself some writer friends. They are absolutely invaluable. So yeah, I wrote a werewolf romance. It is not at all related to my fantasy series, and that's okay. I had a lot of fun writing it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. It's tropey and ridiculous, like they all are, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, I'll be publishing it at some point. I may wait until I have the companion book. It's part of a duology, which I didn't know until I was writing it. So yeah, I may wait until I have its companion written and then release them together. Another thing I did that was different for me is I did not plot this book ahead of time. I had no plan. I literally sat down on the first and said, okay, I want to write a book. What am I going to write? And so I came up with a very vague idea. I kind of knew how it was going to start and how we got into the book. I did not know how it was going to end when I began, which is really nerve-wracking for me. I don't want to say I was pantsing it because that's not really what happened. What I really did was sort of plan out a chapter or two, or plan out the next few steps in the story, and then fill in the story, and then plan out the next few steps, and then fill that in. So it was kind of a planting situation where it was like a micro plan, and then fill the story in, and then plan a little bit more and fill in. And that kind of worked. I don't think I would want to write a fantasy novel that way. It worked for the romance. The fantasy novel, the actions the characters are taking are impacting things on a world scale. It doesn't feel that way in the moment, but overall, over the course of the story, you realize how big everything actually is. And that's not the case in the romance. The romance is very like small focus, very character focused. You know, there's 4 or 5 characters in the book, and the story is basically encompassed within their lives. I don't think I'd want to try to do that for one of the big epic fantasy novels. I don't think that approach would work for me and the way that my brain works. You having a good time down there? I have a lot of help this morning. So yeah, the exercise of participating in NaNoWriMo was extremely useful for me. It allowed me to try some new things and explore a different writing style. It allowed me to test whether or not making myself write every day, so developing a daily writing habit, if you will. It allowed me to test whether or not that is a viable habit for me. It isn't. But I don't know that I would have been able to test it as effectively had it not been something I was doing for the month of April. So I know me well enough to know that I would have tried it and gotten frustrated and been annoyed at making myself write. And I would have said, this isn't working, and I would have stopped. And doing it for a month allowed me to give it a proper test. Like, is this something I can break through? Is it something I can get over? Or is it really just not going to work for me? The answer is it's really not going to work for me, but I don't know that I would have been as confident in that assessment had I not made myself do it for a month. So I feel like forcing myself to write would lead very quickly to burnout. So right now, because my life and my livelihood is not hinging on whether or not I make money on my writing, I have the freedom to sort of do it as a passion project and do it as something I love and do it as almost a hobby, a serious hobby, but a hobby nonetheless. And if I make myself do it every day, it feels like a job and it feels like work and it's not fun. And some of that's just how my brain is geared, and some of that's just me not doing well being told what to do, even if it's me doing the telling. So yeah, NaNoWriMo was an excellent use of the month of April. It was a great little experiment. It allowed me to try some things and test some things I probably wouldn't have tried outside of that bubble. I wouldn't want to do it all the time, but for the purpose of, being able to experiment with some new writing styles and trying some things out that I probably wouldn't have given a fair shake on their own. It was well worth the effort and well worth the activity and well worth the time. So highly recommend participating the next time it rolls around in November.